What happens when a racist judge thinks she's in complete control, only to discover that the woman she's targeting isn't just any regular citizen, but a genius attorney in disguise? A woman who's been quietly playing the game at a whole different level, waiting for the perfect moment to flip the script. You won't believe how this shocking twist turns the tables. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. Stay till the end. You won't believe how this one ends. Maya Johnson walked into the courtroom with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen it all before. At first glance, she was just like any other woman. A simple dress, hair tied back neatly, her eyes focused ahead. To the casual observer, there was nothing extraordinary about her, but those who looked closer would have seen the subtle determination in her posture, the way she carried herself with quiet authority. She spoke modestly, never raising her voice, never seeking attention. But Maya was no stranger to being underestimated. Her race, her calm demeanor, and the way she stayed in the background often led others to believe she was just another woman who could be pushed around. But they were wrong. Today, she was in court for what seemed like a minor violation, a traffic ticket that had been wrongly issued to her. The judge, a woman known for her bias against people of color, had already made up her mind. Maya knew what to expect: dismissal, prejudice, and assumptions that her quiet nature meant weakness. But Maya was no ordinary woman. While others judged her by appearances, she was quietly calculating, playing a long game they didn't even realize had started. Her calm presence in the courtroom was almost like a signal. She wasn't there to fight with words or aggression. She was there to prove that sometimes silence speaks louder than anything else. And today, the world was about to learn exactly who Maya Johnson was. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, as Judge Margaret Stein sat at the bench, her eyes fixed on Maya Johnson, with an air of condescension. It wasn't hard to see that the judge had already made up her mind. Maya had walked into this courtroom today for a minor traffic violation, something that should have been resolved quickly and without any drama. Yet, because of her race and quiet demeanor, Maya could sense the judge's prejudices at play before a single word was spoken. Judge Stein, who had a reputation for ruling harshly against black people, barely looked at the evidence in front of her. She simply stared down at Maya with that unmistakable, dismissive glare, one that suggested she already knew the outcome. "You've been cited for a traffic violation, Miss Johnson. $300 fine. Pay it by the end of the week," the judge declared, without a moment's hesitation, her voice dripping with authority. Maya's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. The courtroom around her seemed to hold its breath, the tension rising as Judge Stein continued to pass judgment, not on the situation, but on Maya herself. Maya's quiet acceptance of the fine was almost like a cue to everyone in the room. She didn't argue. She didn't even speak up when Judge Stein made assumptions about the situation without asking for any real context. Her silence was her strength, a strength that made the judge underestimate her completely. As the judge made more dismissive comments, Maya's patience began to wear thin. But she said nothing. She simply nodded, calmly accepting the outcome, even as a rising tide of anger simmered inside her. She could feel it, the injustice. She had been here before, in different forms, in other places. She had been underestimated, judged, and made invisible. But she was no longer the same woman who let it slide. Today, things were different. This time, she would not let the prejudice pass unnoticed. Her thoughts raced. and she could feel the strength of her calm presence begin to shift. Every time Judge Stein glanced at her, there was a flicker of smugness on her face. Maya, for all her quietness, knew exactly what the judge was thinking. She saw the way people like Maya were always pushed aside, the way their voices were ignored. This wasn't just about a fine. This was about the system that had always silenced women like her. This was the moment Maya would make sure that silence would no longer be her answer. And then, when the judge went to wrap up the case, it happened. Maya stood up. The courtroom went still. No one expected it. Her voice, calm yet filled with power, broke the silence. "Your Honor," she began, standing tall with the presence of someone who had just come into her full power, "I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." The words hung in the air. Judge Stein looked up, stunned. Maya's voice remained steady, but the truth she was about to reveal was as sharp as any weapon. "I'm not just a regular woman who wandered in here for a traffic ticket. I'm a defense attorney, one of the most successful in the state." There was a collective intake of breath from the courtroom. The judge's face flushed. She had been playing a game with Maya that she had assumed she would easily win. But now she realized, too late, that Maya wasn't just a passive participant in this scenario. Maya paused, letting the truth settle over the judge. "I've spent my career taking down corrupt officials, winning cases that the most skilled attorneys would consider impossible. So, when you made that ruling, you made a mistake." The judge's smug demeanor started to crack. For the first time, her gaze faltered. The reality of the situation was now setting in. Maya had been quiet, humble, and unassuming, but underneath that calm exterior was a mind that could tear apart the very foundation of the case before them. She was a lawyer, a professional, and a force to be reckoned with. Maya wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been wrongly judged. The tables had officially turned. With a precise, calculated manner, Maya explained how Judge Stein's ruling was not only unjust, but also unconstitutional. She laid out the legal framework in such a way that the judge, who had thought she controlled the courtroom, now looked unsteady. Maya's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that the judge could no longer ignore. "I'm not here to raise my voice. I'm here to point out that your actions, Judge, were based on assumptions that were wrong and biased. You didn't ask questions. You didn't care to understand the facts. You just assumed." Maya's voice was steady, but everyone in the room could feel the power behind her words. The judge, visibly frustrated, tried to defend herself. "Miss Johnson, you don't have the authority to—" "Actually," Maya interrupted, "I do. And I'm asking you to reconsider your judgment." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The tension had shifted. Maya wasn't just a woman defending herself. She was defending what was right, and she was using the law as her weapon. The judge, desperate to save face, muttered, "This is not how we do things in my courtroom. You're out of line." Maya's reply was simple. "I'm not out of line. You are. And the law says I'm right." For the first time in years, the judge's authority was being questioned, not by force or aggression, but by the law itself. Maya's calm demeanor was in stark contrast to the judge's rising frustration. The more the judge tried to maintain control, the more her power began to crumble under the weight of Maya's legal expertise. The other officials in the room, even the lawyers who had witnessed this exchange, began to shift their perspectives. They were used to seeing people crumble under Judge Stein's harsh judgments. But Maya was different. She wasn't just a victim. She was a professional, a woman who had spent years perfecting her craft, a woman who knew the law better than anyone in the room. By now, Maya's words had started to sink in. The courtroom had turned its attention to her, and the respect she was earning was palpable. The once imposing figure of Judge Stein now seemed smaller, her arrogance replaced with a realization that she had been bested by the very person she had tried to control. Maya didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to argue louder. She simply needed to use her mind, and in that moment, she did exactly that. The power had shifted. She wasn't just challenging the ruling, she was challenging the system. The judge, still trying to salvage her dignity, tried to defend her actions, but Maya's words were too powerful. The law, the facts, and her own arrogance were all stacked against her now. The audience in the courtroom could feel the judge's power slipping away, and Maya knew that, no matter what, she had won. The tension in the courtroom had reached a boiling point. Judge Stein's face was flushed with frustration as she tried to regain control, but Maya wasn't backing down. Maya's calm demeanor, the one that had once been mistaken for weakness, was now a weapon the judge was completely unprepared for. "You have no right to question me in my courtroom," Judge Stein spat, trying to regain her authoritative tone. But the room was already shifting. Maya's words had done more than just challenge the ruling. They had challenged the very foundation of the judge's authority. It was clear now that this wasn't just a fight over a simple ticket. It was a fight for something much bigger. Maya didn't raise her voice, but every word she spoke carried the weight of years of study, experience, and most importantly, truth. "Your Honor, you are making a grave mistake. You can't hide behind your position to dismiss the law. The law doesn't work for you. It works for everyone, even me." The courtroom was silent. The judge, who had ruled with arrogance for years, now found herself questioning her own actions. She hadn't seen this coming. Maya's voice was steady, but it was laced with undeniable conviction. "I'm not here to attack you personally, Judge. I'm here to show that you are letting your biases cloud your judgment." For a moment, the judge faltered. It was only for a second, but Maya saw it, a brief moment of hesitation. The smirk that had always been present on Judge Stein's face faded, replaced by the reality that this wasn't going to be the easy victory she had assumed it would be. She had underestimated Maya. "You've been ruling this way for years, assuming that people like me can't challenge you, that will just sit back and accept your decisions," Maya continued, her tone controlled. "But you failed to realize something. I'm not the woman you thought I was." The silence in the room was deafening. Even the other lawyers and officials in the courtroom seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the judge to respond. But Judge Stein's sharp tongue had deserted her. Maya had exposed the cracks in her armor, and it was only a matter of time before the truth fully unraveled. Judge Stein quickly tried to regain control. "Enough of this. You're wasting my time," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "The fine stands." But Maya wasn't going to let it slide. "You don't get to decide my fate based on assumptions. You don't get to decide anyone's fate that way. You're the one who's been wasting time. I came here with a simple request, to be treated fairly. And you've decided to disregard that request because you didn't respect me." Judge Stein's face twisted with anger. She slammed her gavel down, the noise echoing through the courtroom. "I'll have you removed for contempt if you don't stop this nonsense." But Maya, cool as ever, didn't flinch. "You can try, Your Honor, but if you want to throw me out, you'll have to throw out the law with me." A hush fell over the room. No one had ever dared speak to Judge Stein like that. But Maya was doing more than just speaking out. She was fighting back, not with insults or accusations, but with facts, with the law. "I'm challenging you in the only way I know how," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "With logic, with clarity, and with the belief that justice is something that applies to everyone, even the ones who think they can't be touched." Judge Stein's hands trembled slightly as she glanced down at the paperwork in front of her. For the first time in this entire proceeding, she was unsure of herself. Maya's calmness, her sharp legal mind, and her steady resolve had left her unable to continue the fight the way she had always done, by simply dismissing people. Maya wasn't giving up. She wasn't just challenging the fine. She was challenging the system that had allowed a judge like Stein to maintain unchecked power for so long. Maya wasn't angry, but there was a fire in her voice that made the courtroom listen. The people who had once been silent were now leaning in, hearing Maya's words, and for the first time, the scales of justice seemed to tip in her favor. The tension in the room was palpable as Maya continued, her voice cutting through the atmosphere like a blade. "You're not just here to impose fines. You're supposed to be upholding the law, ensuring it's fair for everyone. You can't allow your biases to interfere with that. The law's blind, Judge, and it's time you were, too." The other lawyers, the officials, even the people sitting in the gallery, were starting to shift in their seats. They could feel it. Maya wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was holding up a mirror to the very system they all operated in. And the reflection wasn't flattering. Maya had turned the tables, and it was only a matter of time before the judge realized just how badly she had messed up. Judge Stein was visibly flustered now. Her face was red, her hands shaking as she reached for her gavel. "Enough, Miss Johnson. I won't tolerate this any longer." But Maya was calm. "You've tolerated it for years, Your Honor," she replied. "You've let people like me walk into this courtroom knowing we don't stand a chance. But I'm telling you right now, I'm changing that." The room seemed to hold its breath, every person there waiting for the final moment. Maya had thrown down the gauntlet. It wasn't just about this case. It was about what was right, and about making sure the truth came to light. The bullies, the dismissive judgments, and the prejudice that had plagued the courtroom for years had met their match. Judge Stein's authority had cracked. For the first time in years, someone had challenged her, and she couldn't simply dismiss them. She had to listen. And for all her attempts to regain control, the truth was clear. The power had shifted. The shift was monumental. Maya had done what no one expected. She had taken on the arrogance of the judge and matched it with intellect, with knowledge of the law, and a determination that couldn't be shaken. The room, once filled with tension, now buzzed with a sense of change, a feeling that justice had been served in a way no one had anticipated. The following day, the atmosphere in the courthouse felt different. The air was thick with whispers, and the usual rhythm of the court proceedings seemed off. Judge Stein had barely shown up to work, and when she did, she seemed unnerved, a stark contrast to the confident figure she once was. The courtroom had seen something unusual the day before, something that had shaken the foundations of authority. Maya Johnson, meanwhile, walked into the courthouse with the same quiet demeanor she always carried. But today, the weight of her victory the day before felt different. She had exposed the flaws in the system, and while she knew the fight wasn't over, she could feel the shift. The people around her were treating her differently. She wasn't just the quiet, unassuming woman from yesterday. She was someone who had earned respect, not through loud words, but through sheer intellect. Maya's moment of victory hadn't come without consequences, though. Word had spread quickly about what had happened the day before. Lawyers, reporters, even the other staff at the courthouse were talking about her. It wasn't just the legal world taking notice. The general public was also beginning to pay attention. What had happened in that courtroom wasn't just a personal victory. It was a wake-up call for everyone who had witnessed the injustice. That's when Maya was approached by an older man in a crisp suit, someone she hadn't seen before. He was standing near the door to the courthouse, waiting for her as she walked past. His presence was one of calm authority, but there was something about him that intrigued Maya. "Miss Johnson," he said, with a polite nod, "I need to speak with you. I believe you might be the person I've been looking for." Maya paused. Her mind raced. Who was this man? What did he want from her? She had a feeling this wasn't a coincidence, but her experience told her to stay calm and composed, as she always did. "I'm listening," Maya said, keeping her voice steady. He introduced himself as Derek Matthews, an investigator working with a federal agency. Maya's curiosity piqued, but she didn't show it outwardly. "Yesterday's events in the courtroom," he continued, glancing around to make sure no one was listening too closely. "They're not just about your case. You've exposed something that's been covered up for years. Something that's bigger than you, bigger than your fight." Maya felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" she asked. She'd already known that Judge Stein's actions were prejudiced, but what was this man implying? Was this about the corruption she had hinted at? Derek's expression turned serious. "I've been following the judge's career for a while now. She's been involved in several illegal activities, bribery, manipulating verdicts, using her position to benefit herself and others in the legal system. But until yesterday, no one had ever dared to challenge her openly." Maya's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about her case anymore. Judge Stein's actions had been just a small part of a much larger problem, one that ran deeper than she had imagined. "The truth you revealed in court yesterday about her bias," Derek continued, his voice low, "is the key we've been looking for. It proves her involvement in a much larger web of corruption. And now we have the chance to finally expose it all. Your courage in calling out the judge, it's the opening we needed." Maya's mind raced. The fight she thought she'd won the day before was only the beginning. The judge's downfall was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And now Maya had become an unexpected hero in a battle far greater than she ever imagined. She hadn't just taken down a racist judge. She had opened the door to justice for a whole system that had been failing people for years. But this was dangerous. Maya knew the stakes were higher now. The more she uncovered, the more she realized just how much power was stacked against her. The people who had allowed Judge Stein to operate with impunity would stop at nothing to protect their interests. "What exactly do you need from me?" Maya asked, knowing that whatever came next would require more than just her legal expertise. "I need your help in bringing the whole network down," Derek said. "There's more to this than just Judge Stein. She's been acting as the face of a group of corrupt officials who've been influencing cases across the state. But we need solid proof. And you," he said, nodding toward her, "are the key. You're the one who can help us get the evidence we need." Maya thought for a moment. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't interested in being some martyr for a cause. But what Derek was saying made sense. She had already exposed the tip of the iceberg in court. Now, it was time to dig deeper and bring the truth to light once and for all. "Tell me what I need to do," Maya said, her voice steady but firm. Derek smiled slightly. we'll need your legal expertise to go through the cases Judge Stein worked on. We've been gathering evidence quietly for some time now, but we need someone who understands the law to help us break it all down." Maya nodded. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew that this wasn't going to be easy. The truth was, she had already put herself in the line of fire. But now, with Derek's offer, there was no turning back. This wasn't just about one judge anymore. This was about changing the system, about tearing down the corruption that had been hidden for far too long. "I'll do it," Maya said with resolve. "Let's bring them down." The next few weeks were filled with long hours, late nights, and a relentless pursuit of the truth. Maya, working alongside Derek and his team, dug deeper into Judge Stein's case files, uncovering a trail of corruption that led straight to the heart of the state's legal system. As she peeled back the layers of lies, Maya saw the depths of the injustice. The corruption wasn't just about Judge Stein. It was a network of people who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes for years. And Maya was determined to make sure they couldn't hide anymore. The battle was far from over. But Maya had taken the first step in a fight much bigger than herself. The revelation of Judge Stein's corruption wasn't just a personal victory. It was a ripple that began to affect everyone around her. Maya had exposed not just a biased judge, but a system that had allowed years of discrimination and injustice to go unnoticed. It was a wake-up call for the entire community, one that made people start questioning how deeply the rot had taken hold. As the weeks passed, Maya's influence grew. The news of her actions spread across the media, and soon, the courtroom that had once been a place of power for Judge Stein became the epicenter of a much-needed change. Maya had proven that you don't have to be the loudest voice to make an impact. Her calm, calculated steps had taken down a figure of authority who, for years, had operated without question. The power was no longer in the hands of those who thought they controlled it. Maya's efforts didn't go unnoticed by others. She began receiving letters from people who had been wronged by the very system she had exposed. People who had been silenced by the same prejudices now found a voice in her. The truth she had uncovered was being heard, and it was becoming clear that the system would never be the same again. Maya had opened the door to justice, and it wasn't closing any time soon. In her personal life, things also began to change. Maya had spent so many years keeping a low profile, focusing solely on her work. But now she realized that her actions had sparked something much bigger. Her reputation as a legal expert had been cemented. But more importantly, she had become a symbol of hope for the many people who felt powerless. Maya didn't need to prove herself to anyone anymore. She had already done it. It wasn't about proving who was smarter or more capable. It was about showing the world that a quiet, determined individual could bring down the largest obstacles. At the same time, the people who had once viewed her as nothing more than a quiet woman who didn't belong now looked at her with awe and respect. Judge Stein's downfall was a reminder of how much power people often hide behind, and how little that power meant when faced with real integrity and courage. Maya hadn't shouted her way to victory. She didn't have to. Her actions had spoken louder than any words could. But the battle didn't end with the judge's removal. It was just the beginning. The story of Maya's bravery had rippled outward, changing not only the legal system, but also how people viewed the world around them. It was a reminder that everyone has a role to play in standing up to injustice, no matter how quiet, no matter how unassuming. Sometimes, the loudest voices come from the most unexpected places. As the story continued to unfold, Maya became more than just a lawyer. She became an advocate, a mentor, and a leader. Her work extended beyond the courtroom as she used her platform to help others who had been unjustly treated. It wasn't about winning a case anymore. It was about righting the wrongs that had been buried for far too long. Maya had become a beacon of hope for others, someone who not only had the knowledge and skills to fight, but the moral courage to do so. The people who had once underestimated her now sought her guidance. Other lawyers, especially those who had been too afraid to challenge the status quo, began turning to her for support. She had built a community of like-minded individuals who were tired of being silenced and ready to bring change. The moment she stepped into that courtroom and exposed the corruption of Judge Stein was the moment that set off a chain reaction, a reaction that no one had anticipated, least of all the people who thought they controlled everything. Maya's rise wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about justice, and what she had achieved was far bigger than a courtroom win. She had reshaped the way people thought about power, bias, and the law. In the end, it wasn't about one case. It was about a shift in the very system that had failed so many people for so long. In the months that followed, Maya became known not just as a lawyer, but as a symbol of what could happen when one person decided to make a stand. Her story became a lesson for everyone. You don't have to be loud to make a difference. Sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that stays calm, that speaks with clarity, and that never backs down. Maya's experience wasn't just a victory for herself. It was a victory for every person who had ever been dismissed or overlooked because of their background, their race, or their gender. It was a victory for justice. As she walked through the doors of the courthouse one last time, she realized that the victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed, ever been silenced, and everyone who had the courage to speak up in the face of oppression. She had won the battle, but she knew her real work was just beginning. Maya was determined to make sure that what had happened in that courtroom wouldn't be a one-time event. It was going to change everything. And she was the one who would keep pushing forward until every person who had been wronged was heard and given the justice they deserved. Her legacy would live on not just in the legal victories she'd achieved, but in the way she had redefined what it meant to fight for what's right. Jamal's victory wasn't just about him. It was for anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or judged unfairly. It was for all those who have been silenced by others' assumptions, those who have been dismissed without a second thought. Jamal showed that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. You have the power to stand tall, to be heard, and to prove everyone wrong. By the time Jamal walked away from that fight, he wasn't just the new kid at school anymore. He was a symbol of strength, resilience, and the quiet power of someone who refuses to be judged by their appearance. The bullies may have thought they were going to tear him down, but instead, Jamal turned the tables and showed them exactly what it means to underestimate the wrong person. Jamal's story is a reminder that we all have the potential to make a difference, to defy expectations, and to fight back in ways that speak louder than words. Have you ever been underestimated? What did you do to prove them wrong? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you turn the tables in your own life. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video for more powerful stories of justice, courage, and unexpected heroes. You won't believe what happens next. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it.